But no matter what, God's word helps with everything. Things that are, if you have chronic physical conditions, the Bible has help for that, even if it can't heal that. All right, so that's the title of this little unit, Considerations when Planning a Year's Sermons. And it really kind of could go with the end of the last section that we were dealing with. The first major section, Jesus was a prayerful and personally devoted preacher because we talked about balance. This will help with balance. Let me say this as an aside as we lead into this. I think I told you guys last Thursday that I was going to preach on depression. Unusual sermon. I've never preached exactly that before. My text was 2 Corinthians chapter 7, 1 through 11. 4 great tips for navigating it. We talked about the fact that depression can't be completely prevented. There's different types. There's manic. There's chronic depression, clinical depression. But no matter what, God's word helps with everything. Things that are, if you have chronic physical conditions, the Bible has help for that, even if it can't heal that. The reason I mention that is I wouldn't say homiletically it was the best sermon I've ever done, probably far from it. But the response reminded me of something we said in class, that people are hurting on every pew that we're preaching to. They are, and depression, Gary Collins calls it the common cold of mental disorders. It disrupts 40 million Americans' lives. And so there's a good chance that there is a good portion of your folks who deal with bouts of depression. And I'm sure I can loop you all in. We all have times of depression. In my introduction, I talked about and gave biblical proof for several individuals, some of God's brightest heroes who had depression. And if you think about Isaiah 53:3, Jesus was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. So he understands. He's been through everything we've been through, Hebrews 4:15. So how do you make sure that you address the full spectrum of what brethren and non-Christian visitors who are among you are dealing with? So hopefully this will help with that, okay? So all right, so we're going dark. All right, here we go. 11 points and then a few little tips. And then as always, if there's something you want to interject along the way, just feel free to do so. All right, number one, vary the type. Vary, V-A-R-Y, vary the type. All right, this was something that we kind of mentioned. I'll give you 4 types from which to draw your sermon types. Textual. You remember how we defined textual in class? I know there's more than one definition, but do you remember the definition we had here?
You said one verse and diving deep into that verse?
Yeah, John 3:16 to John 4:24, Ephesians 3:20, whatever, you get the idea. Joshua 24:15, so forth. Expository, where you expose a paragraph of text. Topical, wherein you take a great Bible doctrine or theme, and then you go everywhere preaching the word. And then bibliographical, where you maybe deal with a Bible book. And under that, I would also put your biographical lessons, character studies, and so forth. All right, so that's the first. Number one, vary the type. So you always want to be measuring and asking yourself, am I balancing out? Now, you probably have a tendency. I do. I tend toward expository. I want to know, is there a text for that? Let me find that text. Let me expose it and make application from that. And I tend that way because I feel like this is what God said. Let me find it, mine it out, and then share it. But I don't believe there's anything wrong with those other types. I believe we need to do all of that. With a topical lesson, you want to make sure that You keep every text that you use in context. That's always important. But with an expository, don't make it sterile and don't confine yourself to the text where you are. So there's weaknesses and strengths in all of them. Okay. What is y'all's? Do you have a tendency?
I like expository. Bob Turner said that doing an expository, if we bring up another verse, he always said just quote that verse. So I don't mind using other verses, but I don't like to bring people to other passages. I want them to stay in that portion that we're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the strength of the expository. What you can do there is contextually connect it to what the writer's doing in the other parts of the book. And that becomes powerful because it shows the cohesion that a writer always has a purpose in every book. And you make it disconnected. And so, yeah, I agree. What about you other guys?
I know for me, I like a bibliographical. And I guess I learned that from Brother Earl Edwards, because I noticed that was his style. And I respected it because I felt like when you go through a whole book, you will learn something new, and you can also branch off to go textual, or you can go expository and topical at the same time.
Oh yeah. By the way, Earl Edwards was my favorite when I was in the master's program at Freed. He was my favorite teacher, and I was probably closer to him than any of the other teachers there. I have a lot of respect for Brother Earl. All right, the mics? What do you tend toward?
Well, I like textual and expository. I like to press the text. I'm learning more to press the text. There's so much in the text, and trying to help people understand how it was written, why it was written, how it's applicable to us today. And I think, I try to make sure that we make it real for us. Just don't preach a text and it has no consistency. You see me, I sent you my article. Is God our refuge? So I just got done preaching that, but I'm using that to springboard into the whole scheme of redemption and ask questions and just do a Bible study. I got a flyer on it already. So,
good.
You want to ask questions.
I like it. That's good. Michael?
I used to be a very much a topical sermon preacher, but one of the things that they asked was that they hadn't had a whole lot of Old Testament here. And so I started preaching through the Psalms and have become, there's so much richness in the language. And I don't think that's something that, I don't like to do a lot of Hebrew, but there's so many beautiful words that take on such a much deeper meaning when you explain that to the folks when you're preaching, like textually, like the word chesed. People don't understand the depth of what that word meant to a Hebrew. So I love textual preaching now.
Well, and it's interesting. I'm guiding the congregation through by email through what we used to call the Lehman Learner, but it's just take a chapter of the Bible every day and walk through a book and do the same thing. And it's interesting in the Minor Prophets how it's not obvious to us in the English that it is in the Hebrew is how there's a major play on words, and that the Hebrew language relies a lot more on poetic type devices. And it's amazing how no matter what literature you're reading in, the literary devices that the writers, the inspired writers, call upon. That's good. And types lead you in that direction. Now, I'll say this about topical. Brother Wendell Winkler was good at both, but he demonstrated the great advantage that can be had in a topical sermon. Hiram is very versatile, but he preaches as good a topical lesson as you'll hear, and does a fantastic job with that. All right, number 2, vary text location. So we're varying the type. Number 2, we are varying the text location. So when you're looking at your preaching, I bet you have favorite books. I do. and I can find myself gravitating toward that. I can even find myself gravitating toward types of literature. Just if you want to see people's tendencies, go to their YouTube page and try to just sample several of their sermons. See how often maybe they're falling into the Gospels, or maybe a guy's an Acts guy, maybe a guy's an epistolary guy, maybe a guy is a Old Testament poetry guy or a Pentateuch guy. You'll see guys having proclivities in certain areas, but what we want to do is to vary that, because all of it's God's inspired word, and there is value and benefit in all of those. So the way that I would describe that is you want to make sure that you're drawing from every major division of the Old Testament and New Testament. Check yourself and ask, when's the last time that I preached from the major prophets? All right, number 3, consider seasons and holidays. Now, some of this is obvious, but here are some other things that might, not every year, but along the way, these may be helpful. How about back to school? You ever preached a back to school sermon? You know, what to take with you when you go back to school, that sort of thing. How about snow? Obviously, you may miss a service because of snow. If it snows where most of us are, then you probably will miss a service. So maybe the week after that. But I preached 13 years in Denver. You just keep on with life, if it snows. But I think it comes top of mind, doesn't it? Isaiah chapter 1. I mean, there are some great texts that you could draw on using what comes with that, and maybe how your community responds to it. Rain or rainy season. If you've ever done mission work in a lot of African nations, rainy season, or in Cambodia, in the Southeast Asia, it affects life. But right now we're in the midst of flood warnings. I didn't know how it was going to be for me to drive to work today. Those are seasons and holidays. 4th of July. I have a sermon from Psalm 51 called Declaration of Dependence, where David, have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness. Taxes. All right, here we go. We're fixing to head into that season. And not just necessarily Romans 13, but think about how people view that. So co-opting things that are already on people's minds, you can then take them to the text and draw application out of that, and it helps it to stick with them.